Hello, hello, hello. We are working on the Shooting Stars quilt. Just going to back that up a little bit to get more of the quilt in. And so this is Shooting Stars. And we have now created the blocks for each one. After creating the blocks for each one, we added sashing along with the corner squares. And the entire quilt looks just about the same. So the only thing that we have done differently is there are blocks that have blue corners with red sides, and we have blocks that have red corners with blue sides. So that's the only difference in the blocks. These blocks were created by using like the square in a square method. And so it only required us to take our squares and just like almost corner, if you will, or border, but I'll call it a corner because it was in each corner that we added two smaller squares. And then it gave us the points for the star. Once we finished all these, and there were 15 of these in the pattern, Shooting Stars is a free pattern from Jordan Fabrics. Then what we did was, after we put all the blocks together, 15 in all for this size quilt that we're making, we then added the sashing. I want to say that the pattern called for 2.5 for 2-inch sashing. I made mine 2.5. So because I made mine 2.5, that also meant that this had to be 2.5 inches square as well. And let me just double check. I think that's what I did, but I'll check the pattern. And the good thing about this is that it's a free pattern, so I can share the dimensions of it, whereas a pattern I purchased, I wouldn't be able to share the dimensions. So let's see. For the sashing, let me see. They tell me the borders. And yes, so they were 2 inches. So I did go a 1/2 inch wider than what they suggested. So that means that when I count 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm actually counting 2 inches because a half times 4 is 2. So I'm going to count 2 inches wider than what they suggested for the borders. So it's not a big difference, but it is something to consider that if you do want something to be a different dimension from what the pattern suggests, then you just need to alter some of your sizing to make that happen. And, I love that. The only thing that they really give you for the borders is that they tell you to cut 7 of them at 4 inches by the width of the fabric. So the assumption is that you know how to put the borders on and you know the tips and tricks of that. So we're going to talk about that today as I attach the borders. Okay. So I cut my 7 out and I already attached them just to save time. And what I did was I assumed, without measuring, that one length should be across the top would be half of 3. So there were 7 in all. So I'm assuming 2 of the sides were going to go, 2 of the pieces were going to go on the sides, and then one and then 3 would go across the top and bottom. So you sew all 3 pieces together. So this is 1, here's the seam, this is 2, and this is 3. And then what we will do And I didn't cut that center out, but I'll still make sure that it's center, and it is. We will cut this in half or we'll cut it to size. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. So this should be the length of. When they don't give you the measurements, it's key for you to do measuring. Even if they give you the measurements, sometimes your dimensions could be a little off when you're sewing. That means it could be wider or narrower than what the pattern suggests. So you just want to do some remeasuring to make sure everything is good. If my quilt is big, I can fold it in half. I just have to remember to times it times two. And I can use my cutting mat to measure the side. I can either go all the way to the end. I can start anywhere. I just have to know my math to get from point A to point B. And so this should be 50 according to the measurement. It might be a little different. It's a little off, but not much. But this is going from 5 to 30. 30 minus 5 is 25. So that's 25. The suggestion that I've always had when I've made quilts and I went to classes is to measure both sides. And the reason we do that is because sometimes your one side could be a little bit longer than the other side. And so you want to make sure that both the opposite sides measure the same. And then we'll do the same for the other two. So this right now is the top and the bottom that I'm measuring. And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm praying that they all are going to be the same. This is not even. There we go. And they are the same. So that means that I need two pieces that are 50 inches long. So remember, we stitched everything together. I'm not going to need all of the fabric from the 3. I am going to need some extra because the width of the fabric is usually, once we take off the selvage, usually it's about 40 to 42 inches, depending on your fabric. If you're using some sort of scraps, it may be even less than that. So I can do one of two things. I can fold these and this one long piece in half, and then measure 50 and then cut it into two. And if I'm going to do that, let me just cut off my selvage. And it's a little hard to see that selvage when you're dealing with batiks, but you want that tightness off of there. Let me see, that went a little crooked on me. I can see where it went crooked. Okay. So I can measure and then I can cut. This would give me the seam right here in the same space. Or I can measure one, and then wherever I stop, I can measure the second one. It might give me two seams depending on how things go, if I do it that way. So it's up to me either way that I choose to do it. I'm going to just take this and do 50. And my cutting mat is a little short of 50, so I can measure this by the cutting mat. I can measure it with a ruler. I can get 35 to 10. And then do another 35 to 10. So it doesn't matter which way you go, but what you want at the end of the day is 50. So this is to 10. And we are going to use our ruler just to get that nice and even. Okay. And I have this piece left over just in case I need it for something else. What? I don't know, but I may need it. So we'll set that aside. And then we need our clips. Now, when I was taught to do this, I was taught that even distribution is always best. So in order to get even distribution, we're going to take this. We're going to line up those edges. I'm a finger press and I will find the center. And I will add a clip. Clip pin, totally up to you. Then, because this is so long, and it's not really that long, but just because I'm used to doing it this way, I will fold this in half again. Use my fingers to finger press. Finger pressing will give me a crease, especially in batik. And I will clip where those finger press marks are. Okay, we'll make sure everything lines up. And we'll do the same thing for the other one. So if I mark this in quarters, that means that I am going to mark my quilt in quarters as well. Because it is a lot, it's not a lot, but because I need to flip the quilt, I'm going to not do both sides and then attach the borders. I'm going to do one, attach the border, flip, and do the same thing to the other side, and then attach the border. Just because it doesn't make sense to continuously flip the quilt if you don't have to. It's not going to hurt anything, but for me, it just makes sense to do it that way. So everything is marked either with pins or clips. We can set that aside. And then we're going to do the same thing with our quilt. We're only going to do one side. Line up that edge so they're aligned. Smooth everything out. Find that center and give it a clip. Then we'll fold this in half again. So half of a half is a fourth. So we're folding it in quarters. And I'm going to finger press. Actually, I'm just pressing on the table, but either way, it doesn't matter. Flip that back open. I can see those lines. And I'm just going to add a clip. Okay. Now, this is marked. Now it's time to take one of the borders. Get a couple extra clips out. You don't have to, but I prefer to clip as much as I can. And when I line this up, the clips should line up. Their hair off is not going to hurt anything, but you want them just about as lined up as they could. And I'm just going to clip right next to it. Make sure everything is smooth here. And place another clip. Slide this down. I have 2 clips in here. We're going to line this one up. Clip. I can look for where those seams are if I choose, and I can clip those just so that I know that those are secure and they're not going to twist on me as I'm sewing. Just laying those one on top of the other. Clip next to it. And we're going to do the same thing going all the way around. So we do, when I say all the way around, I mean we're going to do the top and the bottom first. Or if you want, you can do the sides and then you could do the top and the bottom. So there's no must way, but you do, like sometimes it helps. Like if there's another border here, if you capture this one with this, if you know, if you can. But in this case, I have a seam right on this side too, so it wouldn't matter if you do this side or the top or the bottom. So sometimes people will do sides first and then they'll do the top and the bottom. Sometimes your measurements may vary by doing the longest sides first, because then the shorter sides will be just slightly longer. It works out to be the same, but it depends on how many cuts you want to make. Okay, so everything is clipped. And now we're going to take it to our machine and do our 2.5 inch seam allowance. So again, this is the Shooting Stars quilt by Donna Jordan, the Jordan Fabrics. It is a free pattern on the Jordan Fabrics website. My suggestion is to look up free Shooting Stars Jordan Fabrics. I will also, in the other videos, I did provide the link. I will provide the link for this one shortly after the video is posted. So you can find it that way as well. So at this point, all I'm doing is stitching down the first border. This has no direction to it in terms of directional fabric. So I'm starting with the top and the bottom to attach that border. My borders, my binding, my sashing is blue. I opted to change my thread because I was using white thread, but when it came to my border and I was attaching them here, I didn't want the white to show through on the dark blue, so I didn't have any dark blue downstairs, so I switched to black. And then I never switched the black out, so they're still black. So I'm using black thread, and it's not the end of the world to use the black thread because it won't show through. It's going to read like a dark blue. So, like, you really can't even tell the difference, right? That it's black, even though up close I can see the black. But now, like when I pull this a little bit, you can't see the white. Um, Whereas if I pull, if I zoom in here, not that we're gonna pull, but see how you can see the white thread there against that red? You can't see the black thread against the blue or the white. Okay. So it doesn't matter that I'm using black thread, that being my point. So here's the border for the top. We're gonna flip this upside down. It's amazing. I pressed this and didn't see all these little threads. Well, I wasn't trying to. I was too busy pressing and trying to get out the house this morning. Okay. So we already attacked the border on the other side. We marked both borders by folding them in half like we're doing this. And then folding it in half again. And half of a half is a quarter. So we're folding this into fours. Because this area here is a lot more easier to manage than a long area. So what we're trying to avoid is waving. Sometimes when you sew on your border, sometimes when you don't do it this way, sometimes you will end up with a lot, well, I won't say a lot, but you might have like a significant, let's say an inch left over, because you might have a tendency to pull the border while you're sewing your fabric. And sometimes between the feed dogs and you're pulling, you will end up with a little bit extra. And what that does is it makes one side shorter than the other. It causes one side to wave, and you don't want that. So that's why it's important to make sure all your borders are the same length. Okay. So we have this marked. We've already marked this. And we just have to open that up, find our seam, because we want right sides together. And when you're using batiks, sometimes it's hard to tell which is the right side and which is the other side. Okay. I'm going to lay this down. Now, depending on which side your clips were on, and I knew this was going to be the reverse. They may not line up completely, and that's okay. If they're a little bit off, I know that that was going to be off because of those, because I put the clip to either side of the fold. So I know it was going to be a little off, and I'm okay with that because it should line up at the end, and that's one of the reasons why we don't sew and do this. We actually take the time to clip or pin and do this, because if it's off, I'm going to do it again. It shouldn't be. And I can check the other end just to make sure it lines up, and it does. I can put a clip there. Well, like I said, it just may be a little off, just because of how I didn't clip it. I didn't clip it in the center like I normally do, and that's just because sometimes when I clip it in the center, it's hard to fold it, and I want to be able to fold it. If I get a little bit of gap, I can ease it down just a little bit. And I knew that somewhere in there I needed that. But I do want it to be just as flat. as I can get it. Okay. And let's finish the second side. Now I did use a bobbin because my intent was not to use a bobbin, was to go back to the white, and I didn't. So I didn't use a full black bobbin, which is okay because I like to run those bobbins out anyway. Just because I do like when I'm starting new projects, and this isn't a new project, but when I'm starting new projects, I like to start with fresh bobbins. So I will check because what I don't want to do is get all the way down the other side of this and run out of bobbin. So if I run out like shortly before I get to the end of it, it won't mess me up too much. So I'm just checking every so many inches to make sure that I still have enough bobbin. I should make it to the other end. That I still have enough bobbin left to finish that side. And then I'll reevaluate the bobbin for the sides because I may not have enough for the sides. And again, that's not like the end of the world. I can still run it out because there's no sense in wasting thread. All right. Well, okay. And then here we go to that end. Now, I like to iron my borders and everything else on my big ironing board. So what I will do is I can give it either a light press and then I can give it a even better press on my bigger one. So here we go. That border is on the top of one side, on both sides so far. These are little fraying strands that have popped through. I'm pushing my fabric to the dark side. So one way to do that is to press. And then we can just flip and it will automatically go to that dark side. And I don't need to do a lot of ironing. The main place that I want to hit is the edge of the quilt because I'm going to lay another border on the side and I want those edges to be nice and flat so I don't have any folds when I go to add the side borders. When I see these little strings, I will tug slightly. I don't want to further fray the fabric and I don't want to be so close that it causes a hole. So I'm just paying attention to how easy it is to pull those little frays out. And if it's real easy to pull them out, they're getting pulled out. If it's actual thread, I might not pull those out. Okay. We'll do the other end. And we'll start from this end. Again, we can just, it's like setting the threads, it's flattening those threads out, which helps us to turn better. And it keeps that edge from rolling under so that it's not in the same direction underneath the quilt. Somewhere I ironed this, and when I ironed it, I had a little fold there. Okay. And I can feel it like underneath as I'm going, and I'm just making sure that that is nice and flat. And the other reason why, because I could, right? I could just add it and go, well, like I like to call it sometimes rogue. But I need to be able to lay this out and measure this side. Okay. So again, I prefer to fold the quilt in half. Line up the two ends. So the two ends are together. And then again, if I prefer, I could clip like this so that I'm clipping that corner. That'll, what this does is it reminds the fabric of the crease a little bit better. So sometimes I prefer to do that, or I can clip on the inside. It is totally up to you what method you would like to use to clip. Or pin. And then we're going to fold this in half. So again, folding a half in half makes a quarter. Half of a half is a quarter for those of you that are like me that are math teachers. And we're going to press that with our finger. Now, if this were too long, like if this were a king size quilt, we could fold it in half again. And then each fourth would be in half. So we could do that again. And then that would give us eighths, but that's up to you. So we can get that there. And this is going to end up on the other side, but that's fine. I'm going to clip that like that. Okay, so that side's done. I'm going to work on the other side in a minute. You know what you forgot to do, right? You forgot to measure. Oops. So I'm going to move the clip right to the edge because it is, if I leave it folded, it's going to mess up my measurements. Okay. I knew I did something wrong. Well, I won't say wrong, but I knew I forgot to do something. Okay. So one end on my mat. This is longer. So this is 44. And then we're going to do the other side because we have to measure both. If one side is 44 and the other side is 43 and a half, like we have to do something about that. If they're both 44, we're good. Now, one wise person would absolutely write something down. Another person that likes to go rogue would try to remember the number that she used. Okay, so they're both 44. While I'm here, since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and clip because it just makes sense to do it. Like I said, I would flip it normally, but since I would clip one side at a time normally. But since I'm here, now that was 44. But remember, because I was getting ready to make the mistake and then I caught myself, right? That was 44 folded in half. So that means that it's 88. Okay, so we added those clips. So I have two pieces that I need that need to be 88. I've already sewn two together. I don't know the width because I didn't measure it. Of my batiks. So I'm going to take it here, and believe it or not, they are longer than 42, 44 sewn together. So I had a lot more room on these than I thought I did. Okay. And we'll do the other one. We know it's the same size, so I'm not worried about that. The center of this is actually the seam, so I don't have to worry about that being clipped anyway. And then I just fold this again. And that's 1, 2. Okay. So we're going to bring our quilt back up. I knew that I can start at the center or at the end. It doesn't matter. But I just want to make sure that everything is even. Okay. These two line up. Gonna clip right to the side of it. And then I know that I have a seam here, so I can clip. Again, you don't have to clip your seams, but again, I don't want this to wave. And then I can add a couple clips right there. Hello, hello everyone. I am working on my patriotic quilt. This is a pattern by Jordan Fabrics. It is called Shooting Stars. And we are currently adding on the border. So when I add on my border, when I first started sewing, and I didn't know any better, I would add on the border. No, didn't clip that. I would add on the border and just start sewing from one end to the other. And I would take no concern for how the machine would work and the possibility the bottom of your machine has little teeth, and the teeth are called our feed dogs, and they pull your fabric. So they are what helps to move your fabric to the back of the machine as you're sewing. So you don't have to pull it. It'll naturally just go back that way because of the feed dogs. So what happens is if you pull naturally the feed dogs, if everything isn't clipped or pinned, it might pull your fabric through at a different rate on the bottom than it does on the top. And it doesn't do it like tremendously. It's doing it like at slight differences of increments. And so that what happens is when you get to the other side, you might have like an inch that you're off. And then what we do is we just cut off that extra. But the problem is that now when the other side doesn't do that as much, and so let's say you don't cut an inch off the other side, now one side is an inch longer than the other side. And when you're working with the borders, this is the time that you want both your top and your bottom and both of your sides and the opposite sides to be the same length. So I want my top and bottom to be the same length, and I want my sides to be the same. And that helps us from getting waving and ripples. So if you can avoid that, especially when you have to send it to the long armor, or if you're long arming it yourself, those waves can really make a difference. And it's a lot harder to smooth them out when you are quilting it. It can be done, but sometimes it's a challenge. And sometimes you don't catch it until you get down the other end because it's like going in gradually, and then it's like, oh my gosh. So if you can help that waving, and sometimes you can't help it because sometimes you fudged all along. So you fudged when you made the blotch, You were fudging when you added the sashing, when you added the first border, the second border. So it could happen. Okay, so we have the top and the bottom borders on. We're now adding one side border, and then we have the other side border to go, and then we're done. The whole quilt will be finished. We'll be finished piecing together the whole quilt, and the only thing left to do is quilt it. And I still haven't looked for my thread. I am doing everything by hand. It's free motion. So if I were to send this out, I might get somebody to do like stars and stars on it, but that's not going to happen. Now I might, no, I don't. And if I had a ruler that had stars, I would use that, but I don't have that. Now, I don't have to flip this right away, so I could order a ruler and then put stars in it. So sometimes I have these brilliant ideas and then I will buy what I need to make it happen. But I will check my rulers first because I will buy something and forget I bought it. So we will check to see if we have that before I buy something. But I may, like I said, I may just meander, or I may do loops and just call it an afternoon. We'll see how I feel. Okay, now I forgot that I was almost out of thread. So the stars were aligned. Oh, I'll have enough for the other part. Um, and I did not have to, I didn't run out. I didn't lose the bobbin chicken. And so here we go. So this just needs to be pressed, but you can see the borders are on for the one side. And now we just need to do the other. So again, I only measured one of the borders. So I need to measure the other one just to make sure that it is 44 inches. And that's folded in half. Yeah. And they have just about as much of a difference on both sides. So I can just line that up right with my nail. And for that little bit, it was like a 1/4 inch, but that's a 1/2 inch. I could have fudged that in there, but if I didn't fudge it on the other side, I can't fudge it on this one. Okay. So this is folded in half again. The seam is right here, so I don't need to clip that because I automatically know that that's the seam is the center. Fold this in half. And we can clip and clip. Okay. And we're just going to make sure that our center seam is facing the right way so that we don't sew it on backwards, because been there, done that. And so we are finishing up our shooting stars quilt. It is a patriotic quilt that we are making. This is a free pattern from Jordan Fabrics. And it is called Shooting Stars. Oops. And I have already made all of the blocks. That was video number 1. Video number 2, we added the sashing between the rows. And between the blocks. And then video number 3, we added the sashing between the rows along with the corner squares. And now we are adding the binding, the borders. I should have enough of this blue to do the binding. That's the other thing I have to think about, is what am I going to put on at the back? And I don't have a batik for the back. And I know that I'm going to have to think about like what that looks like. Because I don't necessarily want to use a batik. I don't want to use not use a batik, but I could use a cotton and think about, like, I can go onto one of my favorite sites and I can look up a wide backing that will be great, like some sort of red, white, and blue backing that would be great for this. Okay. So we're on the last side now. So we're going to add that side, and then we will be done with this side. Well, just wanted to see if I missed something. Okay. So we're going to get this started with this side. And again, I should make it now, because this is the last part, this is the part where it is important to make sure that I backstitch So then that way something is caught. Okay, I got it. So then that way it doesn't come apart when I am quilting it. Like, I don't want those seams to come apart. Okay. So we are adding the last border. For this quilt. The border was 4 inches wide. Now, if I really cared, like if I wanted a bigger border, I could make a 6-inch or a 5-inch border, and it could be, let's say, red. If I wanted to make the quilt wider. So that's one way of doing it, is by adding extra borders on. Just make sure everything is nice and straight. Okay. Just want to make sure that I make it with the thread. Because there's nothing worse than sewing and getting almost there, and then you don't check your thread and you're sewing without a bobbin. And it's easier to see your thread up top to see when you're out there, and it's easy to forget the bobbin. And we are almost at the end. And we're almost at the end of that bobbin. Okay, I think I'm at the end of the bobbin. Yep, we made it right to the end of the bobbin. And we're almost to the end of the layer. But like I said, I like that because if I can clear out as many bobbins as I can. So that's like, this is the last small bobbin, and then this is a full one. So when I go back in to wind up bobbins, I'll wind up some full black ones for the next project that I'll be working on. And this one, I don't need a lot of a bobbin for it because I'm almost finished that edge. And I think the next time, like, I'll have a full one if I do the binding in blue. It would be cute to find, you know what? I need to look. Thank you. I need to look. I have a red, white, and blue stripe fabric. That would be cute for the edge of this. That would be cute. So I didn't even think about that. So I'll think about that. So right here, I'm going to start just a little bit back from that seam. Not a lot, just enough that I can overlap it. Just in case the the red starts to come undone, it shouldn't happen, but that way I won't have anything coming out. And right up to that end. Okay. So again, I'll take this to my machine and to my big iron, this is my small ironing board, but I'll take it to the big one and I will give this a good press. Okay. But there's the border. Now, I may do one eventually where you miter the borders. For me, there's really no need. For me, if you like that mitered look, we can miter a border. If you have stripes, it makes sense to miter the border. And that's where the seam is going to come here rather than here. And then that way it will, things will line up. But some people just like to miter borders just because they don't like this side seam here, so they prefer for it to come out. But that's another project for another day. So again, my shooting stars quilt is top is fini. It just needs to be pressed with the borders that just need to be pressed out. We'll do a picture I'll post of the quilt top. I will make some decisions about the binding and the backing, and we may either do a shopping trip this weekend to find a backing for this. Um, I'm really thinking red. That's where I'm leaning to. Leaning to red, but I could do blue. So we'll decide what the backing will be. We'll decide the border, and then we'll get this thing quilted and done. So thank you for joining me as I made the shooting star quilt top. We will get it pressed, we will get pictures, and then we'll make some other decisions so that we can get this in the done pile. See you soon.